Willkommen. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sean Huggins. This is React with Hugs, and today we have a very interesting looking video planned. Check this out. This is how Germany pulled off unification. So, when there was East and West Germany, how did Germany pull off reunifying into one big country? How did they do it successfully, and what's the result, I guess? We're going to find out here together. This is from Verst, linked in the description as always. But how did Germany do it? I don't know. Los geht's.
These are some graphs showing how Germany is divided today, even after more than 30 years of being unified. And despite all this, I'm gonna say it's been a pretty successful unification, even if the journey from then to now has not been an easy one. And in fact, it's still being felt today. Although Germany is now one of the biggest economic and political influences in Europe, it spent 28 years as two foreign countries governed by radically different systems. And the idea it could unite as one was considered almost impossible until the very end. The challenge to pull it off was mostly handed to West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. To achieve a successful unification, Kohl and West Germany had to overcome three steps: international opposition, reintegrating a state that had existed under a totally different ideology, and bringing East Germany up to speed with a vastly more modern economy. Although balancing social divides between East and West is still very much ongoing and has had its fair share of side effects, the unification of Germany has been nothing short of a miracle. Of course, achieving this was never going to happen overnight, and was further complicated by Germany's, let's face it, difficult history. So how did Germany do it? Well, the first challenge to German unification was the idea itself. It was opposed by other countries, and while it may seem strange that Western NATO powers would have opposed the end of a communist regime in Europe, it helps to go back further, even before the Cold War, to appreciate why not everyone was in a hurry to see the immediate dissolution of East Germany. In the years after both World Wars, memories were fresh of the destruction unleashed on the European continent by a united Germany under Kaiser Wilhelm II and later Adolf Hitler. After defeating the Nazis in 1945, the Allied forces were met with a dilemma over what to do with Germany.
Germany was just being some rascals for a few years there, weren't they? You guys were just getting a little crazy, getting a little too rambunctious for a while there.
And so America, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union partitioned the German states into occupied zones based on agreements made at the Yalta Conference. Their shared belief was that under no circumstance could Germany start another war, but they disagreed on exactly how to go about this. A sort of conclusion was reached in the Potsdam Agreement of August 1945. The Allied governments agreed to share sovereignty over Germany, while holding jurisdiction over their zones as a long-term solution was discussed. But by this stage, diplomacy had seriously broken down between the Americans and the Soviets, and the partitioned zones of Germany became a flashpoint at the start of the Cold War. Germany became split into two states based on who was occupying which zone. In what were the American, British, and French zones, the capitalist Federal Republic of Germany was founded in May 1949, better known to us as West Germany. West Germany was boosted with American aid and grew into one of the most developed nations in Europe. Meanwhile, the Soviet zones became East Germany in October that year, or more precisely, the socialist German Democratic Republic.
And if I'm not mistaken, the economy and standard of living was not even close to the same as it was in Western Germany, I think.
GDR for short. Despite the name, the GDR was not actually a democracy and existed under a one-party authoritarian rule headed by the Socialist Unity Party. The partition was seriously emphasized in the historic capital Berlin, which was also divided up between the Allies, but awkwardly located within the Soviet zone. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin.
So that's why the Berlin Wall was so significant too, I guess. Interesting.
Tried forcing the West into withdrawing economic aid to West Berlin and expanding the new West German Deutschmark currency by cutting off fuel and food supplies to the city in 1948. But this served to increase American support for West Germany. Berlin was then torn in half after the Russians constructed the Berlin Wall in 1969 to stop people leaving for the West. Closed off by physical barriers running through Berlin and the whole of Germany, the East existed as a Soviet satellite state with its population politically repressed and closely watched by security forces like the
This is just, I mean, no matter how much I learn about this, it's just crazy to me that basically in a modern time that this can even still exist. Like, just absolutely mind-boggling.
Stasi. Meanwhile, West Germany opened their country and sought to move it on from the Nazi era by rebuilding international relations and joining
Wow,
NATO.
look at that. Looks
The
so
wall
nice.
stood as a brutal symbol of the Cold War for almost 30 years, essentially keeping the Easterners prisoner while both halves of Germany developed into distinct nation-states with their own systems and social attitudes. Although East and West Germany established friendlier relations in 1974, the unification of Germany was more of an idealistic view, summarized by Ronald Reagan's "Tear Down This Wall" speech in 1987. But the situation was changing by the early 1980s, as the Soviet Union went into a financial slump and reduced its influence over Eastern Europe as it became stuck in a costly war in Afghanistan. Knowing a solution was needed, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev allowed for some reforms within the Soviet Union and hoped these would be copied by Eastern European leaders.
I feel like I've heard of this guy before, but let's see.
But the East German leader Erich Honecker refused, and these reforms merely empowered protests for democracy and independence within the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc.
Okay.
Calls for change then grew in East Germany in 1989, with
Wow.
its citizens staging silent
Oh my
protests
God.
demanding more
Dude, this is like hardcore protesting. Look at these people.
freedoms and rights, including to travel to the West. East Germany began leaving the country to seek asylum in West Germany
Wow.
after neighboring Hungary and Czechoslovakia broke away from Moscow and dismantled their borders. By this point, the East German government knew they were in trouble, facing both an exodus and a potential revolt from the population. They finally
Dang.
agreed to open the wall on the 9th of November 1989.
Dude, 1989. Oh my God. That is, how many years after World War II ended is that? I mean, what is that, 40 years? Over 40 years after World War II ends, and just then they are allowing people to cross back over? Like, wow, that is just so crazy to think about. I mean, there has to have been so many families that were separated and didn't see each other for decades. Like, I can't even imagine how hard that would have been.
Relaxing all border restrictions to West Germany.
What a crazy
Of
time.
course, this was followed by the famous scenes of Berlin's citizens later demolishing the wall by hand. The end of the wall
Whoa.
also collapsed the Socialist Unity Party's hold on power, a month later after the GDR parliament removed the clause from the East German constitution, declaring the country a one-party socialist state. But unification wasn't exactly a given despite the end of the war, as the collapse of the East German government had taken West Germany by surprise.
Oh.
6 weeks after the wall was opened, Helmut Kohl visited East Germany and was greeted with mass demonstrations calling for a united Germany. The visit convinced Kohl the time had come to unify Germany, but foreign opposition to the idea had not gone away, even during the Cold War. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and French President François Mitterrand
Margaret Thatcher. I've heard that she was maybe not so well liked by people historically. That's all I've heard about her. I don't know much about her at all, though.
were concerned that a unified Germany would again try to dominate Europe by force. Although an outspoken anti-communist, Thatcher had grown up experiencing the Blitz, and her family had sheltered Jewish refugees during the war. Mitterrand's country had been invaded by Germany twice, and he feared a new German state would politically and economically overtake France. But Kohl found help in a powerful ally, US President H.W. Bush. America didn't feel as threatened by a unified Germany with the geographical distance, and Bush quickly jumped at the chance to support unification, knowing it would take territory away from the USSR and allow NATO more influence.
Aha. So America helped, but because it helps America, basically, is what they're saying. Makes sense. That sounds like a very American way of helping people, you know? I'll help you as long as you help me.
While the USA was on board, Kohl still had to reckon with Gorbachev being a big obstacle. Although Gorbachev had ordered Russian troops not to intervene against the East German protests, the Soviet Union wasn't simply going to hand over a useful buffer state to its rivals. Despite having East Germany politically under their thumb, the Soviets were also haunted by Nazi German atrocities during the war, and giving American and British troops a tactical advantage was an alarming prospect, as the Soviets still had military presence in East Germany. Luckily for Kohl, the Soviet Union was already crumbling. Gorbachev felt that the best chance to keep a disintegrating USSR together was through economic reform. East Germany was also broke, and Honecker had fallen out with Gorbachev and grown very unpopular with the people right before the war's end. So Gorbachev decided one option was to sell the East back to the West and build strong relations with a new Germany. He negotiated that in return for giving up control of the East, no NATO bases would be built in East German territory, and the withdrawal of Soviet troops could not be seen as a retreat. Kohl agreed and said he was even willing to fund the return of Soviet troops home. Later, the total collapse of the USSR in 1990 ended any lingering Soviet influence over East Germany.
Okay,
to satisfy the British and Americans, Kohl promised that a unified Germany would never develop weapons of mass destruction, have a limited military as a member of NATO, UK and US soldiers would stay in the country, and Germany would be a key participant in European integration.
Wow, those are all very big demands in order to gain the trust of the Allied forces so that they can unify again. Actually, I don't know much about the leader of Germany at that time, Kohl, or what's his name? Helmut Kohl? Helmut Kohl? Whatever his name is, that guy. He actually have a lot of respect for him in this case. I don't know much about him other than that, but I'm actually impressed with how he handled that situation.
A deeper alliance with France was proposed, with both Kohl and Mitterrand agreeing to a combined partnership to prevent any conflict and give both countries an equally substantial influence in Europe. This agreement basically paved the way for the current Franco-German political dominance within the European Union we see today. While Kohl kept engaging in diplomacy to make the dream of German unification a reality, the first free elections were held in East Germany on the 18th of March 1990. The results saw a majority for parties wanting to speed up unification. On the 3rd of October 1990, following agreements on both sides and with international leaders mostly reassured, Germany was officially reunified.
Wow.
Germany was now politically recognized as one, but it was faced with the next big question. How do you integrate a socialist economy into a capitalist one? Trying to absorb a former communist state into a developed, free market democracy was an experiment that had never been tried before, and the new German government decided financial transfers from west to east were needed. Over the next 30 years, the German government poured around 2 trillion euros into East Germany to bring its economy and infrastructure to the same standard as the West.
Wow.
This was possible thanks to the solidarity tax, a 5% income tax hike on West Germans to fund this package. East German roads and railways were also given 300 billion euros for improvement.
Dang.
But it's fair to say that even with the financial help, some unification policies had unintended consequences. The German government swapped the East German mark for the stronger West German Deutschmark at a rate of 1-to-1. Savings in the East suddenly became worth much more. But this also increased pressure on East German state companies, as their products became more expensive and unwanted by consumers who could buy better quality items from the West. Over 14,000 East German companies were privatized, but many soon ran into hardship and closed. And with employment harder to find, over 2 million East Germans migrated to the West after unification.
Holy crap.
Finances were one matter, but Germany also found itself encountering something new, the psychological impact of unification. Under socialism, East German society promoted the idea of equality and right to work with basic consumerism, whereas the capitalist West placed an emphasis on economic diversity and personal freedom. There were some in the East who felt sidelined or deemed inferior in the new Germany and were unaccustomed to living in a fast-paced society with more competitiveness. This sentiment is still visible today, as 80% of Easterners polled in 2019 felt the West had not appreciated their achievements since unification.
Wow, 80% of Easterners feel like the West don't appreciate their contributions or accomplishments. That's 80%? That is a lot of people. All right, so definitely some lingering hard feelings out there in the East.
The quote-unquote left behind sentiment was acknowledged by Chancellor Angela Merkel in 2019, when she mentioned a poll saying that just over half of East Germans felt like second-class citizens, and that more work was needed to be done. But since 1997, the German government has kept annual records to monitor East German progress and examine what changes need to be made. And there have indeed been positive developments since unification. For example, 88% of East Germans felt quality of life had improved in availability of goods and services, and others have rated quality of life as having massively improved in the last 2 decades. On average, wages have continued rising in East Germany, and by 2020, they were 90% that of wages in the West. Re-immigration to the East has also picked up, with former East German cities like Leipzig, Dresden, and Chemnitz seeing their populations grow. In fact, in 2017, East Germany recorded net internal migration gains for the very first time since reunification. It's also incredible when we consider that in 1990, East Germany's GDP had been at 43% of the West's, but it had risen to 75% by 2018.
Whoa, okay, so actually, it seems like the East is doing definitely a lot better than before, for sure. That's good to hear. Anyone who is living in the east of Germany, is it good? Are you guys good? You guys good over there? Let me know.
As the solidarity tax was abolished for most Germans in 2021, new and more innovative ways are being explored to keep bridging the final gaps. In January 2020, the German government established a new funding system to aid underdeveloped parts of the country and has offered tax incentives for startup business owners to move to the east. As time passes, it seems likely these differences between the two halves of Germany will become less and less. Realistically, completely rebalancing East and West Germany as equals was going to be impossible within a relatively short time frame, especially when we look at the stark ideological and social differences between the two Germanys, and the pragmatic rather than utopian policies were needed to make this happen. But considering the enormity of the task and Germany's reputation as a strong, stable nation in the present day, unification has been a success. Thank you for watching.
Wow. Dude, like I said before, this helmet guy really has my respect. I feel like he did everything that he could to unify Germany, and it was not easy, I'm sure, but I mean, it seems like he did a great job, and it seems like it was the right decision. But of course, I have to ask you guys, the experts. I'm sure some of you guys out there are probably living in East Germany or have family in East Germany. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts. What's it like in East Germany? Is it really, a little bit worse off than in West Germany? Has your quality of life been improving over the years, over your lifetime, I guess? Let me know. Leave your mustard down in the comments section below. I'm curious what you guys have to say about it. That being said, though, that's all the time that I have for today. So thank you guys so much for being here. And as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.